this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
We were somewhere outside of Iowa City when the drugs began to take hold.
Hey. It's a podcast guest. Let's get him on.
What? No, we can't stop here. This is Hawkeye country.
Gee whiz. I've never been on a podcast before.
Is that right? Well, I guess you're about ready then, aren't you?
I hate to say this, Eric, but this place is getting to me. I think I'm getting the fear.
As your attorney, I advise you to get your mescaline ready, because up next is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas on the Pod of Dreams.
I want me to go to Las Vegas at once. As your attorney, I advise you to rent a very fast car with no top. Tape recorder for special music. Get the hell out of LA for at least 48 hours.
We're all set. If I could just get you John Hancock, you're on your way.
Yeah.
Listen, you're going to be real careful with this car, right?
Oh, yeah, man. Let's give the boy a lift. We can't stop here. This is backcountry.
Damn, I've never rode a convertible before.
Get out.
Hey, to the right.
You can't park your car here.
Why not? Is this not a reasonable place to park?
Reasonable, you're on a sidewalk.
Fire! What's the score here? Lucy paints portraits of Barbara Streisand.
God bless.
Hell, look what you're doing to your car.
Someone should stop that.
Police, are you people crazy? What are we doing out here on this godforsaken road? The Emperor's over there, right? I've never missed a plane yet.
Universal Pictures presents the story that defined a generation. Johnny Depp.
Hey! How are you?
Benicio del Toro.
Let's get down to brass tacks here, man. How much for the 8?
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. A Terry Gilliam film.
All right, now I've got to go.
Some lunch.
Radio, man, radio.
Ben, let's get down to brass tacks. How much for the 8? We're talking about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas on the Pod of Dreams. I picked this movie for this week. This movie means a lot to me. So in my early 20s, when we would have, nights where we had chemicals in our systems, this was the movie we ended the night with very often. We put it on. I'd only make it about halfway before we start passing out, but it was often on. We quoted this movie constantly, and it was a big part of my youth. I wanted to rewatch it now as an older man and see what I thought about it and see if it held up, see if some of the things that I always had kind of issues with still rang true. But mostly I just wanted to hang out with my buddies, and I had such a great time doing that. What was your experience with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
It's definitely a movie that matters a lot less to me than it did at any point than it apparently did to you. We've had a few movies now where they just were kind of all over the scene among the crowds we percolated in. That poster of Johnny Depp, the weird psychedelic poster, it was on a lot of people's walls. A lot of people had it. I had a buddy who was super into Hunter S. Thompson and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I think I tried to watch this movie a couple times before finally making it through, but I don't think I was stone cold sober for any of them. So there's a lot of this stuff that was fuzzy or didn't really remember. So it was very interesting to rewatch, but I feel like I never loved it as much as my demographic did. It never really resonated with me on that deep level. But what did you think? You came back. You're a middle-aged man. You've got a family. Is it as much? Did you get as much out of it now as you did when you were in your 20s?
It's one of those movies that, and this is the same as it was before when I was younger. I love thinking about it so much more than I loved watching it. And it's the quotes, the lines, the sequences. I find this movie hilarious. Like, I laugh so much. There is some very dark stuff in this movie, and that was always the part about it. It was always the part, like, when it started to get dark, I turned it off. And that was interesting watching this now, getting to the end of the movie. I never remembered how this movie ended. Like, the last third of the movie, I just never watched it. We always just turned it off. And because it gets super ass dark, like the scene in the coffee shop, like that is
the diner is
a dark ass scene for a movie. Like, that is some serial killer shit. And it was always a part of the movie. It's like, I hate this. I don't like this at all. It makes me so uncomfortable. But watching it now, kind of thinking about Hunter S. Thompson, what he meant to that generation, what all the 60s into the 70s, the free love and the Timothy Leary shit, and like kind of analyzing that and how, what this says about drugs in general, and also what it says about a generation. I think it's such a profound movie, and it's just I think people miss the meaning of it and get caught up in the weird shit. Like, 20 minutes in this movie, all of a sudden you see like dragons or like reptiles fucking each other. It gets crazy. And, if you're not ready for that trip, if you didn't buy the ticket and you're not ready to take the ride, this movie blows your mind and you're just going to walk out and leave.
So, man, I guess that I must have missed the meaning. There are two scenes where there were actually interesting ideas. Clearly, there's some the drug war is stupid and cops haven't done enough drugs to understand them, or drug user stuff going on. But there's the scene about the wave. About the only thing I've remembered was that line about how in the 60s the wave kind of crescendoed and then it receded, right? Like this possibility that was happening, this sense of massive change that was coming in the 60s. That subsided, and then, people started to go back to whatever everybody else was doing before, and they kind of accepted the change wasn't happening. There's that line, and then there's like, you can't get peace and love from a drug. Those two lines where he's kind of talking about the hollowness of drugs, or that consciousness expansion doesn't work or doesn't get you out of it. But boy, I don't think there was that much more going on. This movie I thought was a lot more interesting to watch than to think about. I find myself wondering what was really the point of all of this. I had trouble relating to those two characters. This is me aging. I thought they were both kind of douchebags and dicks.
They're assholes.
It culminates. And I don't laugh at them treating people poorly. I mean, they're not sticking it to anybody in power. There's a poor, like, cleaning woman who's assaulted. There's the woman in the diner. All sorts of people are just treated horribly, and people have to clean up their mess. And
is there, like, statutory rape, or, like, there's, like,
they treated her
Christina
horribly?
Ricci, like, that is some weird shit what happens with her. Like, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's parts where it's absurd, because I do think they get a lot about drug use, from my understanding, correct, and I appreciate kind of how seriously it took drug use and what can happen. But I was sitting there thinking, did you really need to take a bunch of drugs in Las Vegas in 1971 to understand the decaying American dream and treat a bunch of people horribly and be awful? Was that necessary to get that? You couldn't have done that other ways? I mean, the Benicio del Toro character is an absolute lunatic. I mean, he's scary throughout, and then the diner scene is where there's no pretense that it's even funny or weird anymore, or that it's just drugs. Like, there's just something deeply addled about his brain. And Hunter S. Thompson just sits there and is like, all right, I'm going to let you denigrate her and threaten her, and I'm not going to do anything, and I'm just going to sit here. I guess I'll politely bring back my plate and not steal it like a gentleman. But I sat there and think, oh man, I don't relate to any of these people. And I guess you could look at that as a metaphor for, hey, this is ultimately what the hippies were about, which was nothing, or cynicism or nihilism, maybe, if you want to take it there. But I had a hard time tracking with these characters. It was just they were frustrating to me. I found their behavior frustrating, because they're not rebelling except for against random people whose whatever's wrong with America is not their fault. But I don't know.
But that's the point. So the movie starts with the quote. It says, He who makes a beast of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. Like, that's the quote of played before the movie starts. And that's what these guys do. They make beasts of themselves. They take drugs. They get so fucked up. And it's about this reflection of the 60s drug culture, which is like peace and love. We're all going to get fucked up, and we're going to take these crazy psychedelic drugs, and we're going to change the world. And this movie and the book that he wrote about which became the movie, is just saying like, no, it wasn't about anything. It was about people getting blitzed out of their minds with no point, with no meaning, and they were animals to themselves and to other people, and they didn't find any truth about life or about living. They didn't win any battle against the man or against those that were in charge. They just destroyed their own lives. And that Timothy Leary, so if you don't know about him, he was the guy that did all these studies on LSD, that LSD was going to be this new wonder drug, and had all these people taking it, basically convinced a lot of people to start taking LSD. And, it turned out as a lot of these people just destroyed their lives and were completely fucked up. And I think that's the point of those dark scenes. I read this piece from, the director of this movie, which I think we need to talk about Terry Gilliam a little bit.
Sure.
But he talked about those really dark scenes, like the diner scene, and, showing them be assholes. And it was always the part I hated about this movie. It was the part that always turned me off. It's like, these guys are fucking jerks. Like, they treat people like the part where Hunter S. throws the change at the little person, like really early in the movie where they talk about going on the trip. I hated that scene. It's like, why is he such a dick to this guy who's just doing his job? He's just their waiter. And Hunter S. is like, it's not funny. That's not cool. You're just a fucking asshole. And I hated that scene. But I think it's a reflection that drugs do this to people. Like, if this movie was just them getting fucked up and having fun, I think it would be awful. Because then it's like, yeah, let's go get fucked up and go to Vegas and have a good time and treat people like shit, and we have a lot of fun. And it's The Hangover, right? The Hangover, there's no consequences for these people. But in this movie, there are consequences. They destroy lives. I mean, they don't suffer consequences. They
don't experience the consequences.
But
their lives aren't ruined.
We see them in the light of, like, these are awful human beings. Like, these are terrible people. And I really, this time watching it through as an older person, I really liked that reflection on what drugs can do. There's bad trips, right? Like, you can take drugs. I've never taken psychedelic drugs, but, like, yeah, I understand you take psychedelic drugs. You can have a really bad trip. It can really bring you down. You can really freak out, and you can really do some dangerous, scary things. And I think this movie reflects that. And that's what those scenes are intended to do, which I enjoyed.
I guess I disagree, because there's not even a pretense that Hunter S. Thompson and Benicio del Toro's character are going to try to change or do anything positive. I mean, they're basically, lying about covering a race, and then lying about covering a cop drug convention.
They weren't lying.
Did he write the article? When did he write the article about the race?
Well, he didn't write it, but he was hired to. That's the truth. That's the truth of the story. So it's Hunter S. So in this movie, Hunter S. Thompson plays Raul.
That's the thing. They actually did this. That's another thing. This isn't just a metaphor.
Some of it. A
lot of it, actually.
Yeah.
I was wondering how much of this was creative license, and there's
apparently
not a lot.
Johnny Depp, who spent a lot of time with Hunter S. Thompson before they made this movie, said there's a lot more that they did that's not in the book or in the movie. So yeah,
sure,
they did a lot of this shit.
They don't show us whole sections where they had apparently blacked out and did really awful stuff. So, we can try to couch this as a metaphor, but I don't think they went in there, we're going to change the world. I'm going to write a great article about the Mint 400 that's going to change the world. It was clearly they're going there just to get fucked up. They're not even pretending like there's going to get anything out of it other than hedonistic pleasure. I guess I don't really get that they had motives and then, oh, look, we ended up doing nothing.
Well, he wrote one of the great American novels, is what happened. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which I got right here, is one of the great American novels that he wrote based off of his journey. He was hired. I think he was hired by Sports Illustrated to write this story about this race, and was like, nah, fuck that. This race is stupid. Like, this is a dumb thing that people do. I want to dig deeper under the core of American life and find some more.
How did he dig? What did they find? Where was
they got fucked up? No, they found that
they didn't do any digging. I disagree that they dug.
He looked at 5 years after the Summer of Love and realized, looking back, that you could find the wave crest and there was nothing there. It was
So he just got that one thought. So all the other stuff, he got that one good thought, was able to transcribe it, and that was the value. That was his digging.
Have other great American writers written better stuff than that? I don't know. It's, I think, one of the most profound writings that anyone has ever written.
Do you think that the fact that the hippies failed and didn't win and all went back home and sold out and became the baby boom generation, like that's the most profound thought of an American author ever?
One of them, absolutely.
Okay. I guess I should out myself because I never gotten the mythos of Hunter S. Thompson the way that other people do. I clearly don't value him as much as other people do, because I wouldn't say that's the most incredible and original thought ever. I mean, I guess if he's the first person that thought, wow, the hippies failed and it amounted to nothing, that's fine. But I mean, even take like the movie Woodstock. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Woodstock. I mean, here's a movie that came out before Hunter S. Thompson did this trip in 1971. Woodstock came out in 1970. You see the craziness of that concert. You see all the bands and how nuts it is, and they can't contain stuff, and the logistics are a nightmare, and it's so insane to see all those incredible bands there in 1970. And it culminates in Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner. It's awesome. Jimi Hendrix is an incredible guitar player. Obviously, that's a trite observation, but he plays it, and then after that, you see, after all the people who have come and seen the show and had this awesome experience at Woodstock, there's just dissolution everywhere. There's just trash and sparse patches of dirt and mud everywhere, and there's nothing left. And of course, to even sustain that, they had to have locals feeding them because the logistics weren't there to support everybody. And it's this like fascinating look at exactly the culmination, and you'd almost describe it as a high water mark of the hippie culture and things not ever happening. And there's just ended up being this culmination of fun and happiness that didn't mean anything ultimately, and actually was kind of destructive. And that's 1970. That movie came out in 1970, before great writer Hunter S. Thompson got fucked up, treated people like shit, and wrote that the hippies failed and the hope died.
But juxtapose that with the Nightmare at Altamont, right? The Rolling Stones Altamont concert, free concert. It was supposed to be basically the redux of Woodstock, and they have the Hells Angels, which again, the Hells Angels tied that back to Hunter S. Thompson because that's how he got famous, was embedding himself in the Hells Angels. And people get killed, and it's a fucking disaster. And it's the end of the Summer of Love. It's the end of the hippie era.
That concert was 71, right?
Right, exactly. But I'm just saying, like, that's what he's writing about. That's what he's writing about. He's writing about, this is 5 years later. This is even later than that. He's like, you look back at the hippie era. We didn't accomplish anything. None of that meant shit. Like, we thought we were changing the world, and we weren't. All these people in charge, they won anyways. Vietnam ended in a way that, we didn't. It's not because of us. We didn't end Vietnam.
It petered out. Like, it was a disaster, cost too much. People got sick of it, and Gerald Ford became president. I think
with your cynicism that you relate to, I would think that this would touch you in a way that's like, yeah, all these people, these hippies thought they were going to change the world.
I agree with that, Eric. I just don't know how much credit I give Hunter S. Thompson for having this super original, profound thought about it. That's where I'm at. I agree the hippies failed.
Well, you can't argue with him being one of the main minds to write about that time. Like that's a truth. That's a truth. That's like an
I didn't say he wasn't one of the main minds. I don't know what that means to be one of the main minds, but yeah, that's fine. He wrote about it. The figures.
He's the main figure to write about.
He's a countercultural kind of getting into the underground, and that's kind of what he did.
So for those of you who don't know, one of his first main where he sort of became famous, he embedded himself in with the Hells Angels and wrote a book about what it's like being in the Hells Angels. And that's where the gonzo journalism kind of started. It's this idea where you're involved in a movement or you're involved in an incident, and then you write about it. Like the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the book, which became the book, was originally a Rolling Stone article. They published it in 2 different Rolling Stone issues. It was his journalism. He's writing about this race, but then also not really writing about this race. He's writing about, the time and the era. And it was just an article. He was a journalist at the time, but it's not true. The stuff in there is a lot of exaggerated. He doesn't use his real name. Dr. Gonzo is not him. It's his friend that he was using as a sort of a stand-in, who was like a prominent Latino lawyer. But I think that's pretty brilliant. It's a thing we'll never see again. Hunter S. Thompson is a figure we will never see in modern life, and I think it's worth celebrating, worth discussing. And think of what it is. Like, he was an asshole. He treated people like shit. In this movie, I think it accurately represents it. I mean, we talked about some other bad figures in some of our podcasts. Is it worth talking about people that are pretty shitty?
Yeah,
Raging
I'm not
Bull.
saying
Jake LaMotta's a pretty shitty guy, and you thought that movie was
I didn't say
incredible.
that. I'm not saying the movie shouldn't be made, that Terry Gilliam shouldn't have been able to make the movie. He wants to make a movie, make a movie. I'm not saying he should be canceled. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. It doesn't resonate with me as nearly as profound as it does to you. Maybe he was the first to have the thought. Maybe he was the most eloquent to write that series of thoughts about how the hippies failed. Maybe, I don't know, but I look at that and think that was what came out of you going to Vegas, trashing hotel rooms, treating people like shit, was to be able to just say that, so that, like, if he didn't do that, we wouldn't have known that the hippies failed. We needed him. He's the only one that could articulate that the hippies failed, that there was the darkness, the dark side of the hippie dream, that it was illusory. I don't think he was the first, last, or only person to write about it. And I guess
no, but he was the best.
Cool.
He wrote about it, he was the best to do it.
Yeah, like, how many other people that wrote about the 60s have you read, Eric? He's the coolest for sure. He's definitely a cool guy. He's the coolest to write about it. He's right in a way that resonates in a cool way, because he's a really, really cool dude. But I don't know. Is he the best? Maybe. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about the film. We've spent a lot of time discussing Hunter S. Thompson.
That's what the movie is. But yeah, we can talk about the filmmaking, which I like a lot.
It starts out, I think this movie starts out in an absolute bang. Like, I would watch the first 20 minutes of this movie just on repeat. I fucking love every second of how it starts out. So they're just on the highway, and it's literally the first line of the book, the somewhere up Barstow, and the drugs began to take hold. And you're just like, bam, in this movie, they're driving down the highway. They're so fucked up. They have no idea what they're doing. And I'm in. I want to be in the car with these guys and just having a blast. You weren't, that wasn't a thing you didn't enjoy it at all, or what?
That resonated with me more when I was in my 20s. Like, oh, this is cool. This is fun. We're having fun. We're doing fun stuff. It seemed a lot more cool when I was in my 20s. Now I think about how fucked up they are, and how, I guess it's the desert, so there's not that many people around, but like, I'm glad they didn't kill somebody,
crash their car, or kill somebody, or kill themselves.
I think that the whole time, so sure. I don't think it's that cool. I guess I don't think.
I mean, they have a case of beer, and he's drinking beer. They're taking cracks. So I thought mescaline was like peyote, right? I thought it was something you smoke, but I guess not. I guess you crack it.
They
and
were
you
snorting it. That was the mescaline.
Yeah, I think the little crack thing, the canisters.
I thought that was something else. I thought that was like, not whippets. I don't know.
No, that was mescaline.
Okay.
Which is basically, my understanding is, I've never done mescaline. I'm just going to freely admit that, but my understanding
I haven't either, so I
basically
don't know.
Peyote is from the cactus. But yeah, I mean, he's tripping balls. He thinks there's fucking bats all over the place, and then they pick up Spider-Man, and just messing with him completely. And yeah, they're assholes.
I just feel bad for him. Like, I feel bad for Tobey Maguire that whole time. I don't think it's fun that they're
do anything to him, though, right?
They're waving a gun around, and they're being insane. I mean, they're clearly fucked up on drugs, and they're driving insanely in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it'd be terrifying. I mean, I would want to run too.
But he's also a hitchhiker outside of Vegas. Like, you're gonna meet some fucking characters, right? If you do that.
That's true. I mean, I do appreciate the way they made reality look. So my father-in-law used to go hitchhiking. I mean, he's an older guy, and he was, while hitchhiking was still a thing, he's hitchhiked across the country before, which blows my mind. I can't fathom doing that at all. It just seems nuts. But I look at them and think, okay, I guess we're doing this so that Hunter S. Thompson can get to some thoughts he couldn't get to otherwise without doing this trip, I suppose. That's the job. But at some point, I'm like, why do you have to get so messed up in a way that puts other people at risk and is really destructive to other people? the whole
Sure.
time.
Yeah, if you
I
think about,
appreciate the terror,
if you
though.
think
Like,
about like a narc, yeah, it's kind of a bummer. But you didn't think like no
that's a
point
narc. There we
mention,
go. Yeah, see, I'm not a cool guy.
no
Cool
point
guys
mentioning
like to
these
drugs.
bats. I thought poor bastard, he's seen him soon enough. You didn't think that was funny at all? You didn't find that humorous in any way?
Not really, no. A little bit. I mean, I like the intro. It is a great way to start a movie or a book. I mean, you're right in the middle of it. The drug's starting to take hold. You're just outside of Barstool.
But, like,
it's a great literary way to start a story.
Benicio giving him the acid, and when Raul Duke was like, wait, hold on a second, like, how long is this going to take? And he's like, I don't know, man. It might hit you before we get to Vegas.
He says you're not going to make it. He says
you're not going to make it.
It's more dumb.
And he's like, and he's like pissed. He's like, fuck, man, you made me take acid. Like,
no, you didn't make him do anything.
Well,
you're a grown-ass man.
He's a grown, right? But he's mad at him that, like, hold on a second, I got to check into this hotel. Like, so I think the one major flaw of this movie is you don't know what's happening. Like, you don't know why he's doing any of this until like way later.
He doesn't really even articulate why he did any of it. No, I don't even think that gets fleshed out.
I think if there was like a bit, like, I love the way it starts, but then just jump back and do a scene where he's hired by like Sports Illustrated and they're like, hey, go to this thing, and so then you know why he's there, I think would improve this movie quite a bit. If you're like, oh, that's what's happening, is he's going to cover this race, I think it would add a lot to the movie. If you're like, oh, okay, then you understand what he's doing there. Because when you watch it, you're like, what the fuck? You have no idea what he's doing. You're completely lost. And then he gets to the hotel, and all of a sudden the acid kicks in, and he's just tripping balls. The lady turns.
That's the part I liked the most. That was the funniest. Like, the simple task of checking into a hotel is something a lot of people have done a lot of times. It's very easy.
But Benicio tells me, like, you're going to check in under an assumed name, like committing capital fraud. He's like, oh, shit. And then you can see he's like freaking out, like, oh, shit, I can't do this. I can't do this, man.
Right. A simple task becomes way more complicated when you're on drugs. It's something very mundane, shouldn't be difficult, becomes terrifying.
I think that's hilarious, though. It's so funny.
It wasn't hilarious, but I appreciated the authenticity of it. Like, okay, here, this is very, very difficult. It shouldn't be, but it is. And that's how messed up they are. I appreciated that. I mean, there's times like, I think they get the drug.
I'll remember your face. Take the ticket. I'll remember your face.
Like, I need this, right? That's fine. Yes, the very simple interactions become very, very stressful and difficult. Something you wouldn't think twice about. Become these very, very high octane and the paranoia.
Honestly,
the constant paranoia.
Completely fucked up on drugs, to check in a Vegas hotel, to get your press credentials, like, that would be a real challenge. And I think, if you're watching this movie and you're just like, okay, I'll check it out, and you get to the scene where he checks in the hotel and he turns around and all of the patrons turn into fucking reptiles, that's where you're walking out of the theater, right? You're just like, nope. This is not for me. I'm checked out of this. But I think that's like, you're finally, in his mind, you're seeing what he's seeing, and he is tripping balls, and all of a sudden these people turn into reptiles, and he's got to fucking handle his shit and get to his hotel room. I love that scene. I think it's incredible. There's also one little piece of it that I've always loved is when he walks in there before they turn into reptiles. There's like a couple that are sort of arguing, and he leans in and he lights a cigarette on the guy. The guy has a lighter, and he's like, get out of here. And Hunter S. kind of steps back, and then the woman's like, I like the way you handled that. And you hear like their conversation. I really love that touch too, because it's like, you're seeing what how these people would react to this guy that's just completely blitzed out of his mind. And there's a bunch of stuff in the movie that I really love, where you're kind of seeing how other people react to these guys that are just totally fucking lost it with drugs. And that's one of them that I really appreciated.
I mean, I like Terry Gilliam a lot as a filmmaker, and I think there's a lot of things I like about this movie as a whole. I mean, it's impressive how he got that old Vegas look. I mean, I guess I don't know what Vegas looked like in 1971, but boy, it really feels like a different Vegas, like pre-family friendly. You can bring the wife and kids to Vegas. It looked like a very, very different kind of thing.
Yeah, this movie came out in 1998, so filmed in the late 90s.
Yeah, and it seemed to capture the role. And there's gross print everywhere. I mean, I'm like, was this the carpet and this the carpet they had in the 70s? And it was just looked really, really nasty. I mean, everything just kind of looked gross even before it got messed up. And the acting is, I mean, it was nice to be reminded that Johnny Depp used to really be a great actor.
Johnny Depp is,
and Benicio del Toro,
he's a revelation in this movie. He really is.
Yeah,
you forget
before
that
Jack
it's him.
Sparrow. Yeah, before Jack Sparrow, yeah, he was a guy that was actually doing like legitimate acting.
I mean, this is Beetlejuice, Jack Sparrow, like you said. Like, this is the same guy. Johnny Depp.
Did you mean Edward Scissorhands?
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah,
he's not
right.
Beetlejuice. He's Edward Scissorhands. Sorry, I've been drinking. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but I've been drinking throughout this episode.
I mean, he'd done Ed Wood, which is also great. I mean, he was just doing great stuff, and I was like, it's a pitch perfect performance. And Benicio del Toro is also great. I mean, they're playing guys I don't like.
Is he though? Is Benicio? I love his performance, but he's the part of the movie I think most people would point to, and like they would say this is the part of the movie I don't like, is his portrayal of the character. Like the whole part with the white rabbit and he wants to kill himself, and the whole part where he picks up Christina Ricci, which is super dark. Like, that's a real dark scene and dark sequence. Like, would this movie be better without his character in it? Maybe. I think he gained like 45 pounds to play that role. Like, he is committed to that role.
Is the problem with this? But if the problem is just his character in general, it's not Benicio del Toro's fault. It's because he's.
Oh no! I would never criticize Benicio. Benicio's the fucking man.
Because I'm talking about his performance, playing an awful person. I get that he does a lot of like the worst stuff is him, and Johnny Depp's along for the ride. But
dude, I got season tickets on Benicio. He's the fucking man in this movie.
But I get, if it were a milder movie, if Hunter S. Thompson were messed up in Vegas and seeing all this insanity and not being destructive and committing statutory rape and
did he though? I guess we don't know that.
Here's what he did in a minimum: picked up a girl
and got her hooked on acid. Yeah,
and took her to a hotel room. Okay, what a saint! What a nice guy.
Who maybe was underage? We don't know for certain, but yes.
Even if she's 18, okay, cool.
Not good. Not a good look.
So I get there. I mean, the part with Cameron Diaz. I mean, there are parts that are hard to follow. You can maybe explain to me what happened with the Gary Busey cop. I got really confused by that interaction. I didn't understand why he was going to let go, and then why Johnny Depp was worried Gary Busey was going to come after him. Was that just Johnny Depp or being paranoid?
A couple of things that I read. So all that was improvised, apparently. It was completely improvised by Gary Busey. I think the idea is that Gary Busey looks at his ID and knows who he is.
Okay.
Sure. Knows that he's Hunter S. Thompson, the famed writer, and is like, dude, just go fucking take a nap. I'm not gonna arrest you. You're obviously drunk. Go take a rest. Sure. And Hunter S. is like, I can't. If I take a rest, I'm gonna sleep for like 3 days.
Got it.
And so he drives off and is just like, fuck this guy. And then he sees Toby and is just like, fuck all this. And he peels out of there. So the weird thing is, like, I want to kiss you because I'm lonely. That was like, what are we trying to say? What are we trying to say with that scene?
There was that, and then he also had some lines about how the guy, once he got far enough away or past the rest station, he'd be in the cops' jurisdiction again or something. There was some line about how he was. I couldn't follow it, but it was something like.
Well, I think he's telling him, like, drive out of here, and then I can't follow you. Like, just get out of here. But can I get a kiss? I want a kiss because I'm lonely. That part was just like, what? We're just ripping on cops then? Is that the whole point? I was a little lost at that. So Terry Gilliam. I think we should have a little chat about Terry Gilliam.
Oh, yeah.
So famed Monty Python he was the director of all the Monty Python episodes, right? And he was the director of Monty Python, The Holy Grail, which is one of the greatest comedies ever. He's made a bunch of movies, Time Bandits, which I'm not a big Time Bandits guy. Do you like Time Bandits? Have you ever seen that?
I like how weird it is. It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't figure out what's going in. It's
not my jam.
So weird. The ending doesn't make sense. Do you remember the ending of that movie?
No. Sean Connery's in that, right? For a minute.
Yeah, he plays like some old like king in the desert, and he becomes a father figure for that kid.
Well, it's kind of like the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the kid goes through his closet and he can like time travel, right?
Yeah, but then it involves God and the devil, and then God kills the devil, and the kid ends up back to his parents' house, and his parents don't care about him. But then There's a fire, like there's something in the toaster, and then the movie ends with his parents dying, and Sean Connery drives away as a firefighter, and he's just standing there as his parents touch this like black goo and disappear, like die.
Don't remember that.
It's insane. So I probably like it more than you do because it's weird, but it's not one of the all-time greats, but it's different. It's the kind of movie you're not really gonna ever see again.
Yeah. And so, like, Brazil is one of his famous movies. I've never seen Brazil. I don't know anything about that.
It's a great satire.
Is it? Okay.
I mean, it's got hints of 1984 and all this other weird stuff. And it's one where you have to be careful about which version you see because there's a studio version where his original ending is very cynical and, nihilistic. And then the studio thought it was too depressing, so they made it a happy ending, which didn't fit and was qualitatively worse. But I think Brazil's great.
Okay. So Fisher King's one that I know very well.
I've not seen it.
Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges, but 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys that is like in my wheelhouse. That movie is so incredible. Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis. It's weird as shit, but it's an incredible movie. And then he makes this movie. Then he makes Fear and Loathing, and it's funny because a lot of his movies are kind of childish. And this movie is not childish at all. Like this movie.
I would argue it's very childish. But anyway, go ahead.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
I feel like I want to go to Vegas and get fucked up with my buddies. Yeah, it'd be really fucking cool to do that. And then we can talk about how it's profound and we learn shit afterwards. Yeah.
But the development of this movie is interesting because obviously the book came out in the 70s. Been trying to make it into a movie for a super long time, and. Originally, like Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando were supposed to play the two leads. I think at some point Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi were going to play the two leads. So it had been kicked around for decades. And then Johnny Depp kind of got involved, and he became really close with Hunter S. Thompson. I think, didn't he like burn his ashes or something when
I have no idea.
Hunter S. Thompson died? Like he did Rum Diaries. I don't know if you saw that, which is another one of Hunter S. Thompson's books. Johnny Depp starred in it. I think is where he met what's the chick from Aquaman, Amber Heard. They're in like a bad divorce right now. Anyways, totally not part of the point. But he like Hunter S. Thompson I think picked Johnny Depp. Like, yeah, you're the guy. Like you should play me. And Johnny Depp lived with him, and they became like super close. And I think Terry Gilliam's the right guy for this movie because surrealism, right? Like we're like the drugs and the psychedelics. I think you can't make a story about Hunter S. Thompson without talking about surrealism and psychedelics. And I think he does a really good job at that. Like, where do you stand with that? Because there's a lot of like weird shit, like the reptiles and the visuals that he sees. Like, there's weird things. Like, do you think that's done well?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the filmmaking I think is really good. I mean, the only a couple of parts where like I could tell it was rear projection and it looked awkward. Like to get some of the scenes from like old Vegas, I read about this afterwards, but I definitely noticed it while watching. It's like, oh, this looks really kind of fake and phony. Like in the 30s and 40s, when you'd see people driving a car, they'd use rear projection. So they did that a couple of times. Yeah, where they were behind the wheel of a car. It was clear it was like two scenes maybe where you could see like they were in like a fake car and there was rear projection, and another time they were like walking outside for an establishment shot in like old Vegas, and it looked a little wonky. But drugs are really tough to do in movies. I can't think of very many movies that get it even close to right based on my very, very limited experience and exposure to that kind of stuff. And this does as good a job as any movie I could think about doing it because it's very, very difficult. Usually drugs are played for comedy for a scene, and then they forget that they're on drugs anymore, and it goes away. And this, they seem to really get a lot about.
But like sometimes in movies, they smoke pot, and all of a sudden they're hallucinating spiders on the wall.
Right, and then it goes
bullshit. Away. Like I've smoked pot. Right. That is not fucking how it is. You know what I mean? But this movie, like I've never done mescaline. I imagine, or I've never like sniffed ether. Like, I bet that does some weird shit.
And the voiceover was really helpful. I mean, we needed that voiceover explaining what's happening. That was really key, a lot of that voiceover.
The voiceover was... Normally, I'm not a big fan of voiceover, but the voiceover in this movie was absolutely spot on.
If you took out the voiceover, this movie would be unintelligible, and it'd be, like, unwatchable. You couldn't figure out what's going on. It really
guides you. It really guides you.
You really needed to articulate what's happening in their mind. But, no, I'm saying they get it right. They take it seriously, even though... I guess it's played up for laughs, or it's kind of comedic because look at these guys, I guess, being dopes and being silly, and look how goofy or messed up they are. I don't know, but I mean, I think it really gets it correct. Their weird mindsets are there, like weird suicidal thoughts and just other crazy weird thoughts, like, oh, I'm gonna buy a chimpanzee. Like that's a thought you would have on drugs. Like, I'm gonna buy a monkey. Who would honestly think about doing that? You wouldn't. Nobody would just buy a monkey in a sober state of mind. That's you're really messed up and you do that. It gets it really, really well. And one of the things I did love is that the second time they get really crazy messed up because they trash one hotel room and he's trying to get to LA to finish writing and get stuff done. And even after all that, he decides he needs to do it a second time. But I like in the second time he ended up like strapping a tape recorder to his body. I mean, it's such a thing you would do in like the 60s or 70s to record everything. But you wouldn't have to do that now. You could just record on your phone. But he literally tapes a big old tape recorder to his chest.
You might tape your iPhone to your chest, yeah.
I guess you could. It'd be more comfortable than a whole tape recorder. So he gets to record some of the things that happen afterwards, and he hears the tape and hears some of the stuff he did. In a scene that did make me think of Hangover, but far more depressing and not just played for silly laughs, but like, oh yeah, they did some really horrible stuff. Like, yeah, it starts with them trying to buy a chimpanzee or whatever, and then ends with them at a diner and basically threatening a woman with a knife. And that's another thing. Like, I mean, you can fail to change the world as a hippie. You can have been wrong in your dreams and been delusional thinking the drugs would change, but you could be delusional and not just be an out and out awful person to people and not threaten a woman at a diner. I don't know if that's where the metaphor goes, that ultimately the hippies are sociopaths threatening people with knives, I guess. But the drug movement and the hippie movement can be a failure with, and still have to be terrible. Because yeah, I mean that is a key scene, and I get why you like it. Because to me, it's a sober. It's a sober note.
I don't like it, to be clear. Like, I fucking hate that scene in the movie. But looking back on, I think it's important.
Well, right, exactly, because that makes it harder to look at this and say, wow, it was all just fun. They were just getting messed up in Vegas, having a good time, just a couple of buds getting messed up. How silly and fun is that? It shows the seriousness and a sense of consequence.
Dark-sided, a bad drug trip, yeah.
Not for them. That's of course the big thing where it's more frustrating is if they ended up in jail, having horrible withdrawal. This would probably change my view of the experience if I watched them do that. Instead, it ends
there were zero consequences for them.
It said Hunter S. Thompson drives through a fence, which you could only do in 1971, directly to a plane. You do that in 2022, and you're going to maybe get shot. At least you're going to be arrested and go to jail for a long time. It's just crazy. Literally drives like they missed the turn, and they drive through a fence right up to the plane so Benicio del Toro doesn't miss his flight. And it was crazy. So, a side note, did Benicio del Toro fly back to L.A. between the two trips and then back to Las Vegas?
Yeah, it's a big flaw in the movie. So apparently, the race that he covers and then the like prosecutors criminal justice conference were literally two different events that happened maybe even a year apart. They were different instances, but they both occurred in Las Vegas. And so for the movie, and I think part of the book, I'm just going to start reading the book. I haven't read the book. But they kind of melded them, for the movie specifically, melded them into like one kind of sequence. Because, yeah, it's weird because Benicio leaves and he's like, you left. And then he comes back and then he drives in the airport like a second time. There's like two different where he goes to the airport and comes back.
He calls him from a payphone in Bakersfield, California. And presumably Benicio answers at his office. And then Benicio's also already at the hotel room. And in the span of a few hours, and I get that checking in a flight in 1971
Vegas to LA is a couple hour drive.
It's possible. Yeah. It's possible. It was just very vague and weird, but
it is weird that he goes and comes back and then they do the thing. They do like two different things in this movie. It is a little weird, but apparently that is what happened. Is Hunter S. was hired to cover both of those events and then kind of loop them into the one book.
Well, I mean, and one of the things I liked the best was when he's this is where I was able to not be annoyed at other people's behalf when like he's got the cocaine on his nose and he walks past all these cops at this like prosecutor drug convention thing, like how do we get more drug users, and then it shows a video or the guy's talking and he's just way out of touch. But then there's that one scene where maybe he's not out of touch because there's the talk about how much drug users masturbate or something, and he looks at his pants. That really worked. There's like a bit of self-reflection and also contradiction because the cops didn't know what they were talking about at all. It showed this massive disconnect between two parts of America, which resonated. That landed with me.
I thought you'd like that part.
Well, I did. It did. I mean, and there are parts of this movie I like. I just can't enjoy.
Soundtrack. Did you think the soundtrack was good? Because I love the music in this movie.
Of course, Jefferson Airplane is incredible. I love Surrealistic Pillow is great. You play those two tracks, Somebody to Love and White Rabbit. I mean, you're gonna.
It's got Tom Jones. You got some Vegas shit in there.
Oh, some old school Vegas stuff. Yeah.
So I read this thing on Wikipedia, which is kind of interesting. So the movie ends where Hunter S is driving out of Vegas with his second convertible, and Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Rolling Stones is playing, and I love the way this movie ends. He's smiling. He's kind of talking, there's a voiceover. He's
like, look at me. I just wrote the great American novel. I did a bunch of horrible stuff, and it didn't matter. No consequences me. I'm awesome. I'm cool. People wish they were me.
But apparently, so Terry Gilliam wanted the movie to end with sympathy for the devil, because apparently in the book he mentioned
a line. He read about no sympathy for the devil.
No sympathy.
That was a line in the movie.
But he references that song quite a bit in the book, and so they wanted $300,000 to play at the end of the movie "Sympathy for the Devil," and that was half the soundtrack budget for the movie. So they had a $600,000 soundtrack budget for this movie, and he didn't want to pay half of it for "Sympathy for the Devil." Sure. But that blew my mind that okay, not only is this movie, which cost I think like $18 million, something like that,
relatively cheap,
a small budget movie, but they had a $600,000 music budget, and the Rolling Stones wanted half of that shit for "Sympathy for the Devil." That's what it costs to have that song in your movie. That blew my mind.
Oh, see, I've never heard the specific numbers before, but I've heard many filmmakers say like
in 1998.
Music, well, it's always been very, very expensive. You want like a pop song in your movie, it's going to be very expensive. It's not going to be cheap.
So he decided to go with Jumpin' Jack Flash, a cheaper Rolling Stones song, which I think it's great. I think it works.
Yeah, it's fine.
Sympathy for the Devil with Vegas, that would have worked better. I see why he wanted that. I just couldn't believe that's how much it costs. But like this, you got Bob Dylan on the soundtrack.
No, the soundtrack's great.
It's a great soundtrack.
And the movie, again, captured... I mean, I wasn't alive in Vegas in 1971, but boy, does it feel like everything I've ever heard about old school Vegas. It does just really look a time and place. I mean, like I said, I like the filmmaking quite a lot in this. I don't have a real flaw with the filmmaking. I mean, I thought Terry Gilliam did an awesome job. I mean, I don't know how else you'd film a movie like this. I don't know how you could pull off a movie like that any better, realistically.
Would you like it more if it was just two guys having a fucking great time, getting fucked up in Vegas, if they didn't treat people poorly, if they weren't assholes, if they didn't do all the like dark stuff that happens in this movie? Correct. It was just like, you would like this movie more, right?
Right. So when they're on drugs and not being actively awful to people, just kind of weird. Like when he checks in, I'm like, oh yeah, that's intimidating. The woman's face turns into an eel. Humanity's reduced to being just bizarre reptiles.
Suffers from a weak heart.
And there's weird little like one-liners they say to people, and it's okay. They're just being weird.
What's the score? What happens next?
But when people are actively having their lives, either their day or their lives ruined, I can't just think this is just fun. Then it becomes something else. When they're messing with each other, it's fine. Like when they're fighting each other off and there's weird like back and forth and paranoia and stay away from me, man. Or when he's just in the hotel room and he's watching footage from Vietnam and it feels like the helicopters are there and he feels like he's getting bombed. That stuff all works, and it's interesting and it's kind of funny and weird, and it really captures, I think, something about drug use and what happens to people on drugs that's interesting. But when I see a cleaning woman having a knife put to her neck, I'm kind of like, okay, that's not funny to me that they're lying that they're secret agents or something, and they're going to pay her $1,000 a month, or here's this like woman in the hotel room. There's people not getting paid. I mean, people that are getting stiffed at these bars. It's not like the casino that's having to eat that's going out of like the person's tips. That little person that didn't get paid, he probably took a dip in his pay that day because there was somebody with a big bill that didn't pay. And I think, I feel bad for those people. That's what's in my head. So it makes it less fun because I think of all the dire consequences. And I don't care about people thinking they're weird. That's interesting. And people walking around being weird that's fine. People having weird hang-ups or just being wrong is fine. But people are actively screwed over in this movie.
Have you ever you've been to Las Vegas, right?
I have, but yes, obviously this is like.
Do you find it a dark, depressing place?
Oh, it isn't anymore. It's changed.
You don't think it is?
Well, I don't like Vegas. Sorry. Vegas is absurd, and when you're there, I can't help thinking how absurd it is that there's a city in the middle of the desert. Every time I'm there,
when you fly in, you're desert, and then you see this fucking lights everywhere.
I drove in. I didn't fly. But
you've driven. You've done the drive from this movie. You've been Des Moines to LA. Yes, I have done it. Wow. Okay. What was that like?
It's weird. I mean, you go through Utah and you pass a sign that says next rest area 106 miles, and you're like, oh,
and
I can't get off.
Desert.
Yes,
desert
it's
everywhere.
Just rocks and sand. You're like, oh, I can't. There's not going to be a gas station or anything for 106 miles. That's how far I'm going to go without anything.
That's
as
scary.
Desolate as Iowa might be, there's places to stop all over the place. It's boring cornfield, but there's vegetation and people around. Most places you'd go, you're not going to drive.
There's a town.
Yeah, you're not going to drive an hour and a half and not see anybody. You're looking at this, you're like, oh man, there's just so many places where if somebody murdered me and put my body out here, nobody would ever find it. I mean, just like crazy stuff. And that's Utah. And then you get to Vegas, or then you get to Nevada, and then you start getting like the really cheap outlier hotels that aren't in Vegas proper. They're cheaper, and they're just trying to get people who I guess are just looking for a casino. They don't actually want to go to Vegas. I don't know. And then you slowly get to the city, and you're like, oh, this is an out-and-out city in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't make sense. And casinos are depressing. When you go inside a casino, it's depressing. When you're like walking up the strip, it's mostly just drunk people kind of happy, and then like weirdos trying to get women to come to your room and do all sorts of messed up stuff. But mostly it's like buffets and shows, and it's ritzy. I saw Penn and Teller in Vegas. It was really fun.
Penn's in this movie. He's one of the carnival barkers for sure. One of my favorite parts of this movie where they're in the like circus casino.
The circus,
jump the part where Benicio's so fucked up he can't get off this.
Yeah, that was another one. Like
hilarious.
To that.
Yeah, absolutely hilarious.
Then he kicks him and he's like, some guy kicked me. Who can't believe it? Somebody kicked me.
Quick, like a bunny.
He's like, turn this thing off. He's like, nobody's turning it off. It's not getting turned off. You just be brave. You can do it off of this very, very slow moving carousel that is, again, you could easily walk off, but it was too intimidating when
there's a woman fucking a camel over there. Don't tell me these things. Like, he's so fucked up. Don't tell me these things.
Yeah, that's when it was kind of fun, and that's when it was like, oh, okay, yeah, they're being weird and confusing, but
well, yeah, that's the part of the movie. Yeah, that's like part of my 20s. I can't separate that.
Well, it's fine. I mean, but yeah, Vegas it's a weird place, but Vegas has had a makeover since the 70s, right? Like, Vegas is way more like bring your kids, see shows. There's stuff for kids to do. Tons of great food. We've got some of the best chefs. Come to Vegas. I mean, it's still bizarre. It shouldn't exist. It's so inefficient and absurd.
But there's still that come put your money down. The American dream. You put a little money, you can win big, and you can become rich. There's still a bit of that, and
the movie isn't even a little bit about gambling, though. They see almost
but it's the search for the American dream, the search for poor
Who's
guy.
searching for the American? Who are the people searching for the American dream in this movie?
We all are.
But in the context
Us.
of the movie, who is searching for just every human ever on Earth that's in America?
Americans.
Okay.
We go to
Okay.
Vegas. He talks
This
about
movie doesn't look at
the
almost
used
anybody
car
else.
salesman. We're just where all these people come from at 4:30 a.m. on a Sunday.
Oh,
They're
I just
all-
like that. I like the stuff where he's making observations. Like, that's genuinely interesting. It's
Have
like,
you not been to a casino and thought the same thing? Like, where the fuck do these people come from at 4:30 a.m. on a Sunday?
No,
Like,
I hadn't thought of it before, but then I saw Hunter S. Thompson have those thoughts, and I was like, oh, good, this is profound. Now I can have his thoughts.
I see
Yes,
what you
of
did
course.
there.
So, so I've been in, like, Riverside. There's a casino in Riverside. I went there once.
I've been
It
to
was
Riverside
depressing.
many times. You can throw craps at Riverside.
Sure, but it's depressing. But it's like a big circle. It's one of the few places where smoking's allowed, and you see people just sitting there comatose. I've been at poker tables where you see somebody who barely knows how to play poker, and they're desperate for human connection, and they sit there, and then like they're just giving money away just to be vaguely in the vicinity of people. And it's like, oh my God, there's got to be some better way for you to connect. You're losing money. It's clear that you're desperate to just have conversation. That's what's happening here. No, of course it's very, very
That's what
depressing.
this movie's capturing. I think.
I disagree that there's very little of that. There's not nearly enough for my taste of show me what's going on. Humanize these people. You've got really keen powers of observations. You're really articulate. Tell me what's going on and what's happening. Like, I want to hear your voice more. I don't want to just see you. I mean, I don't care that the drug stuff is fine. They capture it well, but I also want to hear your voice. I probably would like the novel a lot better than the movie. I'm guessing if I ever were to read it, I'd probably enjoy it a lot more. Hearing more of his words than just him being messed up or saying insane stuff to people, scaring the bejesus out of people. Because that part where it's like, you'd be surprised how many used car salesmen are playing poker at 4:30 on Sunday morning. Like, that was a very quick observation. I like that. Maybe I'll have to give the book a try. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh.
I just bought it. I'm definitely
you
gonna
showed
read it. Yep.
It was hard for me to look back and think. Well, some of those drug scenes are stressful too, because I can imagine how stressed I would be in that situation. But then I also have trouble not empathizing for the people. And the worst is, of course, the woman in the diner who gets her body ridiculed.
That
she
scene
stands up for herself, and then Benicio del Toro threatens her.
That scene is hard. It's hard to reconcile. I'm so confused.
I think you don't like it because it harshes your vibe. I think it harshes your mellow.
It bums me out. Bums me out big time.
And what's more is Benicio del Toro gets a really nice send off. He gets a really romantic send off. He's a unique creature. He's too weird to live and too amazing to die.
It's a beautiful quote. Yeah, it's a beautiful quote.
But he gets that almost right after. I mean, it's like a couple of scenes after that horrible exchange, where he treats the server just
one
like
of God's creatures,
and gives him, and it's clearly he admires him. And I guess he's a journalist, so he can't get involved or whatever that weird cop out is. But I think it's important that it's in there. But yeah, I get why you wouldn't like it. It bums you out. It makes it less fun. You think, oh, I can't just view this as a silly, fun. Hey, we're getting crazy in Vegas. Woo! We're trashing a hotel room. I mean, like, when I see all the water in the final scene, I appreciate that he's sitting there writing. Like, that's part I appreciate. But then I look at the hotel room, like, people have to clean that up. People are going to have to, other people's job have to clean up his mess. He's apparently not having to pay for the hotel room, and he's not having to clean it up. And they did all this awful stuff. And it's like, man, I just feel bad for whoever has to clean it up. I was like, that room is trashed. And maybe it's heightened, and maybe it wasn't really that bad. Maybe that's just lingering drugs are making it look worse. Who knows? But
If you build it, he will come.
all right, Eric. So it's going to be that time to tell the people what we think. You put a number. This thing that took lots of people hours to make. Just give it a quick number and tell us why you gave it that number.
All right, so my letterbox rating on this movie. So out of 5 stars, you can on Letterboxd you can do out of 5 stars, and you can do half stars. I gave it a 4. Like I said when I introduced it, it's a movie that meant so much to me in my 20s. I wanted to rate it higher. I think that the dark scenes were always the parts of the movie that I disliked. So like I said, normally we'd get like 20 minutes in the movie and we'd turn it off because we were, too intoxicated, or it was just the end of the night kind of thing. And so watching the whole movie through, like there are, towards the latter third of the movie, there's a lot of dark scenes. And I had a hard time with those, and I've always had a hard time with those scenes. Those are always the parts of the movie I didn't like.
Because I think you can't reconcile it being about a fun, cool trip with the actual awfulness of the people doing the tripping. I think that
exactly
we have to do that.
That's exactly right, 100% right. But when I step away from it and I think about it more, I kind of appreciate those scenes. I kind of appreciate the fact that, like, those parts of the movie reflect more about what it's like to be high on crazy ass psychedelic drugs and like what that really does to you, and how you have some bad trips and how that shit kind of fucks you up a little bit and you do some weird things that you're not going to be okay with.
It's perfectly understandable, justifiable.
And I think if you cut that stuff out of the movie, you would say a little bit like, okay, go get high, go to Vegas, have a good time. There's no consequences. And I think the parts of this movie where you see them do dark things make you realize, like, no, that's not what it's about. Like, that's the point of the 60s LSD drug culture. Like, there were consequences. These people destroyed their lives. They got super, super high on drugs and didn't do anything with their lives. They didn't accomplish anything. They didn't change the world in any meaningful way. They destroyed themselves, and that's what drugs can do to you. And I think that's what this movie does really well. And so I'd give it a 4. I want to give it higher. Honestly, I wanted to give it a 5-star. I really. Oh
wow!
When this movie started, and it's somewhere out of our soul, drugs started to take hold. I was like 5 stars. I was like 5.
It's a great way to start a movie or not. I agree.
We can't stop here. It's backcountry. You got Spider-Man want to jump in the car. I'm like 5 stars. This is a 5-star movie. And then it starts to drift into this part where I'm like, oh shit, this is dark stuff. And then you got Christina Ricci making, was it Bette Midler or not
Barbara Streisand.
Barbara Streisand.
Exclusively Barbara Streisand portraits.
I was like, this is so dark. She's too young, and this is weird. And you're getting this young girl high on LSD, and that's dark. And so it starts dropping stars, and then, and then when you think about how big of assholes they are and jerks, that's where I land on 4 stars. So. Okay.
Well, I appreciate your love of this movie. It clearly resonated with you more then and now. I saw it when I was younger and I liked it. I might have aged out of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And it's not because the filmmaking's bad. I mean, this is, I've said this before, I don't know how Terry Gilliam could have realistically done a better job. It captures the time and place really well. Eric is typing.
Well, I was just gonna see what on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's not really thought of as like 49% on
It's split down the road. A lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it.
Critics don't love this movie.
Some do. Well, that's the thing. Like if you look at
audience score is 89%.
Well, sure. People that are big fans of drug use and partying watch this movie and love it. If you don't care about drugs, you probably aren't watching Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But I might have just aged out. I love the filmmaking. I look at this and think I couldn't figure out how you'd make it a better version of this. But the part of like, hey, let's go get messed up on drugs and have a good time, that's there. But there's too much other stuff going on, and I appreciate that it's in there. That it's not just have a good consequence-free time. The metaphor for me doesn't land quite the way it does for you, because Benicio del Toro's character is a lunatic from the get-go. I mean, he's absolutely insane, and he has no pretense of doing anything other than just getting messed up for the sake of getting messed up. The idea that like it's a metaphor for the hippie movement in general doesn't work, because there's no like, oh, Hunter maybe wants to get messed up to write better, get some weird ideas. Okay, but mostly they're just doing it to get messed up. And I'm going to transform the world. That's already come and gone. They're at this point just doing it to get messed up for their own self-gratification. and it gets the drug use right. But man, it bums me out and it gets me frustrated. Even the trivial interactions that are really short, I keep thinking about other people's what's happening with them. I can't shake that. I'm sure it'd be fun to go get messed up with your buddy in Vegas in 1971 if you knew you weren't going to get in any trouble. But I mean, they should have. They were putting a lot of people's lives in danger. Now you can call me a narc or say I'm being self-righteous. That's fine, but I can't shake those thoughts as I'm watching this. I'm just like, oh man, these guys, they're making a lot of frustrating, terrible decisions. Like they're taking acid in the desert as they're driving into Las Vegas. It's not really a cool choice. That's an insane choice. Like, take acid, but don't drive.
No,
like,
well, they're just taking acid. They're fucking snorting cocaine and doing mescaline and drinking a case of beer. Like
while driving, yes. They're out of their minds, and that wouldn't be fun to me anymore. Maybe it seemed cool in my 20s, but I think of that and I think, okay, I'm going to like ruin my life and ruin my family's life if I do that. I'm not going to get away scot-free from all that, and it sounds more stressful than fun. Like I wouldn't have a good time doing that anymore. But the bigger thing is that, I just think, okay, I have trouble viewing these as people that there's even a pretense of chivalry or nobility. And that's fine. That was Hunter S. Thompson's thing, was excess. That was a big part of who he was and his writing style. And I haven't read his stuff, so maybe I should give it a go. But I was just like, man, I don't like these guys from the get-go. I'm like, I'm not having fun with buddies. I'm like, these guys are jerks. They're at best being annoying, but at worst, like scaring the piss out of people, threatening them with knives. I mean, there's the whole elevator scene where the guy gets threatened by Benicio del Toro.
This big fucker. I read the big fuckers.
And then somebody, I mean, it's like, am I supposed to view that as funny? Is that a funny scene? It's played for comedy. Like
it's
the door
fun.
opens.
I think it's funny. We used to just clown on that scene the whole time.
Yeah, I guess because you identified with the drug users and not the squares in the elevator who were being threatened. But maybe somebody being threatened with a knife. I don't know. Like, funny? Because they don't matter? Those people in the elevator don't matter because they're squares?
No, it's psychotic. What he does to those people is absolutely
So then what's funny about it?
Nothing really. I mean, if you think about it in a rational sense, it's not funny at all.
I guess I have trouble not doing it.
It's criminal mostly what he does to those people. It's a fucking crime what he commits.
So
he threatens to stab them.
I don't know. So maybe if I were, I just like, I can't just identify with the drug users, because if you identify from their perspective and you dehumanize everybody else, then it's kind of funny. Because their perspective doesn't matter. I'm threatening this guy with a knife.
There's a theory that Benicio del Toro doesn't exist. Like he's not a real person.
That's fine. I don't care if there's a fight.
It's a complete figment of his imagination.
First of all, that's a lame cop out because it was based on a real person who actually existed, and that's a pathetic lame cop out to say it's Fight Club.
But
Fight
there's
Club
a
made
theory.
it very clear. I don't care. The theory is dumb. If you came up with that theory, if you think
I didn't come up with it.
I know you didn't. But if you're on the internet and you think this is, I think he made up Benicio del Toro, you're an idiot. You're dumb. That's a stupid perspective. Anyway.
It's like Oscar Zeta Acosta is the real guy. He was like a lawyer.
Yeah, he was a Mexican, but they hid his identity, so he made him some generally Samoan. I mean, I read the Wikipedia page too. I don't know. Anyway, 2.5 is my rating. This is a long-winded way.
Wow, that's low. That's fucking low.
Because I can't enjoy it. This is my subjective rating. It's my opinion. Whatever, man. It's my opinion. I can't have fun with the movie. I can't enjoy it. I just feel bad most of the time and stressed out, and not in a good way. And it's played comedically. Even
did you ever like this movie?
I would have, if you had asked me in, let's say 2005, I probably would have been like 3.5.
So it has changed since you got older.
Oh yeah, I said this. I led with, I think I've aged out of this a bit. It's hard for me to not think the other people that aren't treated like real people in the movie are actually real people who had to experience the other side of this. And I'm not talking about the people who had experience him being weird and getting his like cigarette lit at their table or whatever.
I love that scene.
He's not like exclusively defying convention. It's not like these people are square and they have stupid hangups about stuff. There's some of that in there, but some of it's like people should want to not be threatened with knives. A woman whose job is to clean your hotel room shouldn't be tackled and shouldn't be on top of her with a knife. 18-year-old should be able to, or 16, however old Christina Ricci is, should be able to not like be given LSD and by some predatory lunatic. That's not just social conventions. That's just like, okay, you're being a piece of shit. It's not, look at these fucking squares in the early 70s having hang-ups. That was the cop part of that resonated. I like the part where the cop got screaming out, I'm a police chief from Michigan. I mean, that's great. But anyway, 2.5. It just didn't work for me.
Did you think anything was funny in this? Did you laugh at all in this movie?
I don't know that I laughed. I smiled at some of the parts when it was, again,
like,
when it
you
was
don't
just...
think this is not a reasonable place to park. You can't park here. This is a sidewalk. You don't think that's funny at all.
So I guess what's funny is that
like this
the guy
guy's
whose
so
job it is
fucked
to
up.
make...
This guy's so fucked up. He's pulling to a Vegas hotel and he just parks on the sidewalk. And the guy's like, you can't park here. And he's like, why? Is this not a reasonable place to park? He's like, no, it's the goddamn sidewalk.
The joke is that they're so messed up that they just don't even care about the pretense of where to park. That's what's funny. What other pretenses are funny to not have when you're on drugs? Oh, is it not reasonable for me to put a knife in your neck? Is this unreasonable for me to...
You're taking that a little far.
Oh, but I'm taking the logic of that scene. I mean, the guy is just trying to get the car parked, and he has a job to, like, and then it's just funny that he doesn't care. And then his car isn't towed. It'd be funny to me if his car was towed.
It probably was. It must have been towed. He's not going to leave it there.
He gets the car back later. The car is always there when they need it. The car is never missing. He didn't have to say, oh, shoot, now, because I made a stupid decision earlier, I have to go get my car somewhere else. Then they go back to the car and they leave. There's zero consequences at any point. If their own stupid choice led them to have to get it later. So if this
was just a comedy, if it was just like, dude, where's my car, or The Hangover, you would like it more? Is that fair to say?
Sure. Or if you acknowledged that these people are more jerks. It plays, almost all of the movies played up comedically, really, except for the scene at the diner. That's the only scene that's not played for straight up like comedy. It's not like cartoony and kind of goofy and weird. That's the one where it's like... The
Benicio suicide's pretty dark.
That's totally cartoonish. He's like, oh, you want me to drop this when White Rabbit peaks? Okay. And he holds like a grapefruit. He's holding a grapefruit, and then he chucks the grapefruit at his head.
No, but Benicio wants him to throw the thing in the bathtub.
But he doesn't take it serious. I'm talking about the tone of the movie. Benicio del Toro might have been serious. The character in the scene might have been serious. But the way it's played as a movie is comedic. It's totally bizarre. It's through Hunter S. Thompson's eyes, and it's just so goofy. And he hits him with a grapefruit and then runs out the room. And this bizarre, like, almost like he hit him with a spitball. I mean, it's just goofy. They don't treat that as serious. They don't take Benicio del Toro's suicidal urges seriously. Neither does Hunter S. Thompson doesn't in that scene. It's not like I'm going to take this seriously. Like, you're just being fucked up on drugs, so whatever. I'm not going to actually drop this tape recorder into the water and kill you. I'm just going to hit you with a grapefruit.
White Rabbit peaks. Is that not how you want to go out? I'd go out like that. I'd be okay with that.
So right now, is that how you'd like to go out, Eric? Is this a confession? Do we need to get you help?
I'm just kidding.
I mean, if I'm like 80 or something.
Hotel, there's like weird shit floating in the bathtub. That's I don't want to.
Yeah, because he's been sitting there festering for a long time.
That's a dark scene. It's one of those parts of the movie where like
it's not played. I don't think it's played dark.
It's
I think
not
it's played
funny,
live.
but it's not funny to me.
You think hitting him with the grapefruit is funny?
It's comical, but it's dark. It's comical but dark.
This whole thing's a dark comedy. It's not. I mean, this isn't like a screwball romantic comedy from the 1930s, but everything's played as dark comedy, again, except for the diner scene. That's the only time where things really feel real for a second, where somebody else other than, and that's part of, I think, why it also, it's the server at the diner is treated like a real person who actually has feelings and thoughts in that scene, and that makes it less fun.
Oh, she's terrified. It's so...
I know, but nobody else's emotions are treated seriously throughout the entire rest of the movie.
Christina Ricci's are kind of, like...
Not really. They just get rid of her because they're worried about
dude, like, you gave this girl LSD, like, this is...
He wants to get rid of her.
He tells her he could hang for it.
I know, he wants to get rid of her, though. The whole joke is that he wants calm to write in the hotel room, and they want to get rid of her. Again, it's dark. What's happening is actually dark. but there's a comedic tone over it all. That's what I'm saying. There's a comedy layer over all the dark
So you
stuff.
didn't like this movie? You don't like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
It doesn't work for me. It doesn't really work for me in the way that
Okay.
apparently works for you. You seem to just resonate on the comedy surface and the fact that there's
No.
this darkness all the time. I can't escape the darkness. The comedy just doesn't play. And the only time when the comedy veil is peeled off, when they take the comedy mask off and just play the darkness underneath, that's the scene you like the least. That's the scene where you're like, oh, this is making me uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And if they played it that way,
I love that it makes me uncomfortable.
well, it should. If it didn't make you uncomfortable, if you were like, oh,
There's
so
something
funny.
wrong with you, yeah.
You need to enjoy. He's just getting a lemon meringue pie. I don't know what you're talking about. He paid for it. Yeah, that would be messed up if you thought that. But the comedy doesn't land when I'm just thinking about all the darkness and the people being actual people, even when it's comedy. I don't think somebody getting threatened with a knife in that context is funny, or some poor like valet who's not a rich person. I mean, you can attack capitalism all you want, but it's just some guy, some schlub who has to deal with Hunter S. Thompson's choice, and Hunter S. Thompson didn't have to deal with it at all in the movie. And so it made it very difficult for me to enjoy. Because the only way you can enjoy it is to disregard those other people, I think, throughout the movie. You have to just think about it from we're just being fun and silly and ridiculous, and it's lighthearted and there's no meaningful consequences. And that's how the humor lands, because they're just so messed up and absurd. But all those people that he screws over, I can't think of them as not actual people in the movie. Anyway, that's me. But yeah, I mean, this is not a movie I would just sit down and watch ever again. It's not that for me.
All right, should we transition to the 5 degrees of Field of Dreams?
Transition. Should we transition?
I have had some alcohol.
I know. It's all good. I shouldn't give you grief. I was too cowardly to do more than just one beer.
Should I breathalyze myself, see where we're at?
Yeah, come on. I hope you're at a 0.2.
It says 0.14. There's no way that's right.
You're less drunk than you were before.
I have gone less drunk. That's not accurate. Okay, Ben Lewis. The 5 degrees of Field of Dreams. It's the trademark of our podcast. It's the thing people come back to. What you're going to do is you're going to take the movie we picked, which is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and you're going to connect that back to Field of Dreams, the greatest Iowa sports movie of all time. You're going to do it in 5 total movies, so you're basically picking 3 movies to connect actors to. Ben, would you like to go first? I can go first if you want, but would you like to go
first? It's fine. I'm not super impressed with my work this time, so I'll just get mine away. Hopefully you've taught mine. So Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, we get I like this a lot. We get a bit part from the musician Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Holy shit. I think we might have had the same thing. Go ahead.
So Flea is in like 65 in Berkeley or San Francisco, somewhere in California. He's at a club.
In the bathroom.
Hunter S. Thompson does LSD for the first time, and he spills some on his sleeve. And a hippie comes in. He's like, "What's the trouble, mister?" And like literally licks the acid off of his sleeve. And this was really funny. This was maybe one of the parts I did laugh at, or at least I chuckled to myself a lot. And then some guy in a business suit came into the bathroom and saw just a man licking another man's sleeve and was super uncomfortable with it. But that man was Flea, again of Red Hot Chili Peppers. So Flea is in a movie I used to love more. It's now my second favorite Back to the Future movie. Back to the Future Part 2. He is the rival to Marty McFly, and he's the one that's like, "What are you, McFly? Chicken?" That's him in Back to the Future Part 2. Back to the Future Part 2 actually has a lot of people in it in really small roles. This is where maybe I don't know if you went Back to the Future Part 2, Eric, but then a lot of little bit parts. But there's they're at a future 2015 arcade, and they're trying to play some old-fashioned arcade machine, and the kids of 2015 can't figure it out because it's so archaic. And one of those kids is like Marty McFly comes in and he knows how to do it. It's a shooting game. And they're like, "Oh, you use your hands? It's kid stuff." One of those kids is Elijah Wood. He's in that movie in that scene. And Elijah Wood, here's where I'll be really shocked if you pick this movie. Elijah Wood is in a movie called North. North is movie that it really resonated with a young Ben Lewis in 1994. Elijah Wood plays some super awesome kid, and his parents, Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Jason Alexander, they ignore him. And he's
Wait,
like, you know what?
hold on a second. His parents are both Elaine and George from Seinfeld?
Correct.
No
I'm
shit.
glad, if I do nothing else, if I bring this movie to your attention, Eric, nothing else.
Wow.
Because there's a lot of insanely big names in this movie. The amount of people in this movie is bonkers. So Elijah Wood, he decides he's going to disown his parents because his parents don't appreciate him. He's a great kid, straight A student, great, and his parents don't pay attention to him. And he's sick of it. He's had enough. Well, he meets this guy who's played by Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis, who, sadly retiring from acting. I feel like you just got to note that. Bruce Willis is like, hey, I know where you can go. There's an exchange where you can pick your own set of parents. And it's this weird back alley, Diagon alley.
You're
thing.
Making all of this up.
I am not making it up.
This is not real.
No, maybe I'm mixing that up with a different movie. But he gets to pick his parents. No. I'm mixing it up with another. Let me renege on that. So we're gonna do it. He is actually so great that at some point he gets branded as being a great kid, and all these parents write him in and want to be his parents. He's such a stellar kid that all these people want to adopt him. And at one point, he gets adopted by this family in Texas, and Big Paw is played by Dan Aykroyd. He keeps hopping around. All the parents fail him, and he ends up not appreciating him. There's a whole bunch. You look at the cast list for the movie North sometime, Eric. You'll be shocked about all the Oscar winners and famous people that are in this random kids movie that you never saw in 1994. Anyway, so I mixed the plot up, but he just ends up getting. I don't know if he gets an article published about him, but Bruce Willis gets the word out that Elijah Wood is, up for adoption, and he's such a great kid. And so he just keeps trying out all these other parents. And anyway, Dan Aykroyd plays the father of this Texas father. They like everything big in Texas. And, I'm doing it again. I don't care how many times I go back to it, Eric. I'm doing it again and again and again.
Sneakers? Are you going sneakers?
Sneakers.
Yeah.
Sneakers with Dan Aykroyd and James Earl Jones, who's also in Field of Dreams. Sorry, I'm guessing I can already tell that Eric used Flea. So let's hear who you went, what Flea feature you picked to go from Fear and Loathing, Eric.
I did use Flea. So Flea's my guy. Flea, the bassist in Red Hot Chili Peppers, Californication, one of the greatest records ever made. So I picked Fear and Loathing. Flea's in this movie, as you mentioned. He's in the scene where he's in the bathroom. They snort cocaine off his shirt. Flea's in a lot of movies, but he's in a movie called The Big Lebowski, same year, 1998, in the same year as Fear and Loathing. He plays one of the nihilists in.
Flea's one of the nihilists? I don't think I ever knew that. Okay.
Yeah, he's one of the nihilists.
We believe in nothing, Eric.
Yeah, we believe in nothing. Also in The Big Lebowski's Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of the greatest actors ever. So sad that he's gone. He's in the Boogie Nights, one of Ben's favorite movies. Actually, not one of your favorite movies.
It's great. It's
low tier PTA for you,
it's not even low tier. There's just I don't know, top 5 PTA. I mean, it's great. I love Boogie Nights. Please don't.
Boogie Nights is a future Pod of Dreams episode. We're gonna do it eventually. Right?
I hope. Well, maybe. Are you picking it? I don't know. There's a lot of PTA.
We'll do it. We have not done a PTA yet, but we're going to do Boogie Nights eventually.
I love Boogie Nights. No, I was only because I love other stuff more that I wouldn't put it higher. I love Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights is
I'm not tepid on Boogie Nights at all.
Boogie Nights is incredible. It's a fantastic movie. It's so good. In Boogie Nights is an actor named Alfred Molina.
Oh yeah.
Alfred Molina.
Oh, that scene. Oh my gosh, what's it? Sister Christian. Oh my God, I love that scene.
Sister Christian, yeah.
That would maybe be in my top 10 movie scenes of all time. I would probably put that specific scene.
But then I think you've done this route. Alfred Molina's in Maverick. Maverick with Art LaFleur. Art LaFleur. He's the guy. He's like the first baseman in Field of Dreams. He's one of the baseball players. So that's how I do it. So Flea, Big Lebowski, Boogie Nights, Maverick, Field of Dreams.
And Maverick, we're talking the movie with Mel Gibson?
Yeah, Mel Gibson, Maverick. Yep, Art LaFleur is in that movie. Wait. Yeah. So was Alfred Molina. Alfred Molina's like one of the bad guys. He's one of the.
Oh, he's at the
players.
very end, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy that he makes the ace of spades appear against Alfred Molina at the very end. That's right. Okay.
Right. Yep. So that's how we get there.
Okay.
So that's my 5 degrees of Field of Dreams. Ben, do you have anything else you'd like to say about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
I mean, if you're a square, you might not like this, but if you're a cool guy like Eric, you'll probably love it.
So I love this movie. I really do. It has a special place in my heart.
In your fart?
In my fart. Don't do drugs.
I'm remembering my Just Say No in elementary school and about all the deleterious effects that drugs can have.
So if you're listening to this and you say, Alexa, play the Pot of Rosedale podcast, it will play our podcast. It'll play this.
Even though this is the Pot of Dreams, it'll play the Pot of Rosedale?
It will play it, yeah, because it's the most recent episode. So kids, tell your Alexa to play the Pot of Rosedale.
Tell your parents'
podcast.
Alexa to play it. If they're not listening to it, absolutely.
And you'll hear this. No, I love this movie. I love the soundtrack. I love the feel. I love the 70s. I love Hunter S. Thompson. He means a lot to me. So the other thing I haven't mentioned yet is my brother, he was just on the other episode. He introduced me a few weeks ago. He introduced me to this character and to Hunter S. Thompson, and he's read all of his stuff. He's read his books. And
have you read Hunter S. Thompson before?
I have not. I've read it. So he wrote for ESPN for a while, like Page 2. If you ever read Page 2, he wrote this article. The first thing I ever read about him was about like the Baltimore Ravens, like the Ray Lewis Baltimore Ravens. He wrote about, it was like he was like comparing them to like leeches. It was super weird. But I remember reading him like, wow, this guy's fucking weird. And then I was like, oh, that's the same guy from Fear and Loathing. So like I've never read his books. I have it here. I'm gonna read it.
So your connection with him is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas plus his
ESPN
for ESPN Page 2.
Page 2. Yeah.
That's your connection.
My personal connection with him. 100%. Yep. And so I find him an interesting character. I find him a unique person. And I think he's a valid critique of our society.
Eric got the last word. So what are we gonna listen? What are we gonna watch next, Eric?
Right. So next episode of the Pod of Dreams, we're having another guest, a special guest, one of our buddies, you and me,
and a daily fantasy sports superstar. I really think we need to hype up a guy who's won millions playing fantasy football.
Literally millions.
Yeah, I'm not making that up. That's
this guy that's going to be on our
We're talking
podcast
7 digits plus. Yes,
is a superstar on daily fantasy. He's one of the best. He's an expert. Neil Orfield is going to be on our podcast, and he's going to be watching the movie Uncut Gems, and we're going to review
really great movie about people who weren't circumcised.
That's it. Yep, 100%. That's the podcast. So Neil's going to jump on. He's going to talk about Uncut Gems, and we're going to talk about gambling. We're going to talk about the Timberwolves, and we're going to talk about betting on
celebrate
sports.
Too much. You know what? Get over it. Act like you've been there before, you losers. Celebrating because you made the playoffs. What a bunch of lamos.
Well, watch Uncut Gems. It's on Netflix. And don't listen to Ben. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a Hawkeye fan. He doesn't know about basketball. And enjoy our next podcast. And, take it easy. If you can stand on a hill in Des Moines and you can look west, you can see the high water mark when the wave crests down.
You just see cornfields and apathy.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hey, Go Iowa Awesome is the best website in the world.
Hey, Eric, you know what's a great city? St. Paul. St. Paul's a great city.
Nah, it's not that great. Des Moines better.
That's the smartest thing you said on this podcast.